Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of Power Moves Young Leaders Network Edition. On this episode, I chat with Hillary Robert of RE/MAX Quinte, and we dive really deep into marketing. Hillary's background revolves around marketing, and what I loved about this conversation is it goes beyond the low-hanging fruit tips of, oh, try posting this type of video or try posting this type of content. Hillary actually dives into what is the consumer journey, what are the different phases of the funnels, and how can different content attract people at different points in time. Hillary shares her background of how she got into the real estate industry, and she talks about moving to a new community where she maybe didn't have those roots, but yet found some success building her database, and she's done a great job in the real estate side of things. We also chat toward the end about how to use AI tools. You're going to love this conversation. From RE/MAX, this is Power Moves YLN Edition, where we go in depth with some of the best young RE/MAX agents and brokers to unpack what it takes to be a top producing real estate agent and the moves that took their careers to new heights. My name is Wade Paterson. I'm a director with RE/MAX Canada, and I'm your host for this audio experience. And on this episode, I'm joined by Hillary Robert of RE/MAX Quinte. Prior to entering into real estate, Hillary had a successful marketing and media career, which included building and growing several businesses. Over the past decade, Hillary has dedicated herself to the real estate industry, and as her online bio puts it, if you're looking for someone who is still using a photo from 30 years ago with crossed arms and a bad perm, Hillary probably isn't the agent for you. RE/MAX Quinte services the Bay of Quinte region in Ontario, including Prince Edward County, Quinte West, Belleville, and Brighton. Hillary, welcome to Power Moves YLN Edition.
Thank you for having me.
Excited to have you on, excited about this conversation, but let's start with your pre-real estate life. So as I mentioned in the bio, you had this career in marketing and media, but what I didn't mention is that you've written in publications like National Post, Entrepreneur Magazine, MSN News. So can you unpack the full story of what you were doing prior to real estate?
So I am the type of person who always needs to be busy and needs projects to work on. So that means from a very young age, I jumped into the workforce, and that sort of kickstarted a lot of opportunities that came my way very early in life. So I am a graduate of journalism. From there, I went into working with the National Post for a very short stint. I have ethical conundrums with the way that media is published. So I stepped away from that and decided to steer those skills towards marketing. I worked with a ballistic security manufacturing company for a long time. So they manufactured a bomb-proof or bomb-resistant and bulletproof window laminate. And our goal was to sell that product to other companies and countries and security forces. And it was really interesting. But then I got a job in real estate.
That is one of the most diverse backgrounds that I've heard. So like what led you to real estate? Was real estate always in the back of your mind, or like why did you eventually dip your toe there?
So I am in a strange family of realtors. None of us work together. My uncle owns a brokerage in Fort Lauderdale. Another uncle is actually was with RE/MAX for a very long time, and it's something that's always been around and I always had an interest in, but watching them while I was a kid and seeing them miss family events, not be available on weekends and things like that was like, this is not the job for me. So I stayed away from it for a really long time. But you know, when you love something and it's there and you just sort of like dip your toe in it and then it's 10 years later and you haven't left.
100%, 100%. Well, what's interesting is that your journey into it, though, my understanding is you didn't become an agent right away. So you were an admin in your office, and now even you're doing some level of being a training coordinator as well. So what advantage did you get from that? Like, was there an advantage starting as admin before getting your real estate license?
So I was young. I was in my early 20s and I didn't really think anybody would take me seriously. And I wanted to learn the industry from the inside out. So I did start reception with a brokerage. I moved into doing marketing management for that brokerage. And then I moved over to a small team and took over their marketing and their administration. And we ended up being so busy that we brought in a second administrator so that I could focus solely on the marketing. And it was in 2016 that I got my license or was working on my license, and decided to step away from that role to focus more on the marketing element for more agents and brokerages as a whole, because I felt like there was this big gap between the technology that was being developed, that was being implemented in other industries, and what agents and individual agents and brokerages were using on a day-to-day basis. And I just found that so fascinating. So I stepped away from from that team and decided to venture out on my own, start the marketing firm. I did have my license while I was running my marketing firm, but I didn't sell any houses. It was parked in Ontario. We can't fully park a license, but equivalent. I wasn't selling, and built a really awesome client database of amazing real estate agents in Canada and the US, and focused more on the marketing development, recruitment development, and strategic growth.
And in terms of the market, because I know you were mentioning prior to this interview that you kind of started from the ground with no database or connections. So like specifically, tangibly, how did you build that up over time?
So I'm originally from Ottawa, Ontario. And when I left that admin role, I moved to Quinte West, and was honestly the only people that I knew here were my parents. They were Air Force, so they were posted here. This is where they retired, and I just wanted to be close to family, and decided, hey, what the heck? Let's uproot my entire life, go somewhere where I know nobody, and just turned that into an opportunity to build new relationships. And it was really enlightening coming from somewhere where when you grow up in the same place and you know the same people, and then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, there's all these new people I don't know. I don't have any mutual connections with anybody here. And really having to start from the ground up. So over the last couple of years that I've been actively selling, it has been an interesting adventure to grow a personal brand, build relationships in the community. And I like to think that I've done that pretty well. There's still obviously room to grow, because it's only been, I started selling in 2019, 2020 here. So it was really that shift during the beginning of the pandemic that pulled me into a sales role.
And what about learning some of the nuances of the community itself? So I've never been to the Quinte, Trenton area, but how did you learn about this area? Obviously your parents were there. I'm sure that they, showed you a bit, but how did you embed yourself in the community?
So I didn't start selling when I moved here right away. Like, there were a couple of years where I really just spent my weekends getting to know the area, driving around. I made connections with a few local real estate agents who were really gracious, and in a way took me under their wing to show me the real estate ropes in exchange for me showing them the marketing ropes. So it worked out as an awesome, old bartering system of trading value for value, where I got to learn the communities and its nuances while they got to ramp up their lead generation and have sort of a inside scoop to what was going on and how to position themselves well.
So the bulk of this conversation is going to be about marketing. I had to joke before we hit the record button here that, you were the most organized person when we were originally planning these episodes for 2024. You had this concept. You said, Wade, I want to talk about strategic marketing versus spaghetti marketing. So let's start right there. Maybe for somebody who doesn't know the difference, what is spaghetti marketing, and why do you want to be strategic versus spaghetti?
So this is my term for when you throw things at the wall to see what sticks. And I think that is 99% of real estate marketing. Even some of the top performing teams, brokers, they are not necessarily strategic. They are reactionary in putting out content, in developing plans, in qualifying and following up with leads. In everything that they do is usually a reaction to a situation they're in, as opposed to thought out, well-crafted. And it's not to say that it doesn't work, because sometimes you do throw something at the wall and it sticks really well. Other times though, you're losing that momentum that you could have had the forethought been put in. And so in my own business, I was in a good position to start from scratch, and really I had a lot of free time on my hands. So I put that all into the development side of things, and it allowed me to go from 0 to 100 in my first year. And that was amazing. And even with the many realtors that I've worked with, once you sit down and you start doing the planning and creating an objective and making sure that everything that you're doing points towards that one objective, it makes it easier to stay on task and get predictable results.
Can you unpack that a bit further? So, okay, you have the one objective, but then how do you actually go and deploy content or marketing pieces? Like, what does that actually look like put into action?
So a lot of it, let's sort of start on the brand development side, because that's something else where as much as we are so fortunate at REMAX to have a massive national brand that people recognize, international brand actually, that people recognize and know, like when somebody sees the REMAX balloon, they think real estate. But as an individual agent, you still have to differentiate yourself within the REMAX brand and create your own goals and your own persona. And there's this crafted image of a realtor, which I joke about in my bio of the crossed arms, old headshot. And that worked really well a long time ago, but now it's all about building connections. So if we're starting from that brand development, it's putting thought into who do you want to work with? Who do you want people to see you as? What are the constraints of your business? What type of real estate do you want to focus on? And really working outward from there. So starting with the who, starting with the goal and the focus allows you to create content that is always geared to the right people and their decision-making process.
One of the questions I get from time to time is when it comes to social media networks, like where should agents be posting? Where should they have a presence? I personally, the advice I give is to ask themselves two questions. Question number one, what do they like using, right? If you hate a certain platform, it's maybe not a great idea to be using that platform because you're not going to be personally motivated to do so. And then the second has to do with, your potential audience and who you want to be doing business with. So I'm curious your take for that same question. I mean, where should agents be focusing their time? And also, is it always obvious who their audience of clients is going to be, or does it take some time in the business before you understand kind of who you want to be working with?
So I think if you ask any new agent what type of clientele they want to work with, they will tell you they want to be a luxury realtor after seeing Selling Sunset or Lux Listings or one of those Netflix specials because of the image that is portrayed there. But so to answer that last bit of your question first, I think it does take time to figure out where you're most comfortable and what clients you enjoy the most, because until you've experienced working with a few people within a niche, you really don't know what you're getting into. You might know the houses, you might know the commercial infrastructure or whatever it is really, really well, but the people change. And there are similarities. I work with a lot of military clients, for example, and they are all similar. Their personality types might be very different, but the goal is the same. The way that they look at houses is the same. The way that they decide on a house is usually the same. And that is not something that I would have foreseen for myself prior to actually putting my foot into it. And as far as being present, it's this omnipresence is the word that's tossed out in the marketing world all the time, of being everywhere all the time. And I think it's really overrated, because for most people, once you've figured out who you want to work with, they're not everywhere all the time. So some people who are focusing on like a very old school commercial focused realtor will probably do better on LinkedIn than they will on Instagram or Facebook. Whereas somebody who is targeting millennial Gen Z will do really well on platforms like Instagram and TikToks, which are very visual and very fast-paced content. If you tend to work with people who are between the ages of like 35 and 55, Facebook is a gold mine. And how you use those different platforms also changes based on the audiences that you're trying to work with and the people that you are wanting to make a connection with in the right way. I think in my entire years of building a business here, I've had maybe one Instagram lead, and that's just not where my clients come from. Whereas I know somebody else in the office next door to me absolutely kills it on Instagram, because that's the type of clientele that they want to work with. And ironically and not ironically, it makes perfect sense. The places where we perform the best are the places where we spend the most time. I enjoy Facebook. I hate Instagram. So I do really well on Facebook. My colleague, I don't know if they even have a Facebook account, but they are rock stars at Instagram. They are always on there engaging. That is their whole strategy, and it really works. But we're entirely different businesses. And I think that that's something that as a real estate agent is developing their own business plan, the first place to start is, where do you like to spend your time? Because the last thing that you want to do is to make this become more work than it needs to be.
What about when it comes to organic versus paid? I mean, realtors are in all sorts of different categories. Those who are maybe more experienced and have been in the industry for a long time, they're busy, right? So they maybe don't have the time, or in their mind, they don't have the time to be able to be putting out really good creative. On the flip side, somebody new to the industry might not have that luxury of money, and they do have some extra time. But what are your thoughts in general of paid versus organic content?
Your quality of leads will be different drastically on paid versus organic. Organic will always be more qualified because they intentionally sought you out and likely have already started to, without you knowing, build a relationship with your brand before they made the decision to connect with you. Paid advertisements, I do not want to push them aside because they're really, really valuable. And it's unfortunate that they cost money, which is the purpose of them, but they're almost more valuable to somebody who has no presence because it's an introduction to new people. So when I'm looking at marketing plans, I'm looking at 4 stages of discovery. Is the first one, where that is your first impression, and paid ads are great for discovery content. And then we're getting into more of that consideration phase where people need to be reminded who you are and why they sought information in the first place, or how they discovered you in the first place, and really focus on that brand development there and that relationship development. The nice thing about online is that we don't actually have to participate in that part. They're reading blog posts, they're watching videos, they're seeing how you engage on social media, they are seeing your newspaper ads or whatever it is that an agent is doing. They've likely already hit that discovery with a paid advertisement and I guess it's just that expanded reach of paid marketing, being able to get that message out there right away, whereas organic truly takes time. I get about 14,000 monthly visitors to the Quinte Living website, which is my team. And that did not happen overnight. And had it not been for paid ads in the beginning, I don't think that we would be at the 14,000 organic views now.
So can you keep going through the consumer journey? Because you kind of talked through the first couple steps there. So what's 3 and 4?
Absolutely. So we have, if you're picturing, my favorite diagram is actually from a marketing company called Moz, and they have like a coffee filter and a decanter on top. So you have like your discovery phase is trying to catch everything that's coming in. And that is the first impression. And then people have to build a relationship with your brand, and that's the consideration phase. So this is where people are making the decision about whether or not your brand clicks with what they're looking for, whether or not you click with their personalities. Sometimes, like if I'm looking for a service provider and I'm looking at 3 different providers, you're going to go with the one who makes you feel the most comfortable, and what makes people feel comfortable varies based on their needs. So when somebody clicks with you, that's their consideration. And then you go into a conversion stage. So this is where people have actively made the decision that they want to pursue working with you further, or follow up with you, or engage with your brand. And of course, retention. And this is like on the macro scale, because there's macro conversions, and then there's like little micro funnels within that of every time somebody makes a decision, they're going through this 4-step process over and over again. But it's that ultimate retention is the last step. And that is making sure that the people who have made the decision whether to work with you or refer you business or follow your brand stay there.
And you talked about Quinte Living, which is this brand that you have built. And that's another one that agents tend to question is, do they kind of build that sort of name or like business style? I don't want to say business because it's almost lifestyle type presence, versus do they just create with their own name, their own personal account? What pros and cons do you see for both?
So that was something I sat down with for a very long time, because There are some amazing teams who do, and brands that do really well branded under an individual. My thought process actually stemmed from a conversation that I had probably 10 or 15 years ago with my uncle in Fort Lauderdale, over a couple of glasses of wine before hopping on a cruise ship, where he said his one piece of advice in this business was to build something that's sellable. And so for me, that really sat with me. In our industry, we tend to think about the immediate future. So where's my next deal coming from? What does the next 6 months look like? When am I getting paid? And my uncle really put into perspective that you need to retire at some point, or at least have an exit strategy down the road, so that when you move on to the next stage, whatever that is and whenever it is, you have a product that another real estate agent can assume without losing its value.
That makes a ton of sense. One thing I want to ask you about, and this is really evident, we'll link to the Quinte Living Facebook and Instagram down in the show notes. But on the Instagram page particular, I know you don't love Instagram, but what you're doing a really great job of is the video content. And just a simple question, why do you think it's important to use this medium of video?
Okay, so full disclosure, my first video ever was a live video, broadcast in front of about 1,000 people talking about marketing to, it was within a social media group, and it was real estate marketing. There were 1,000 viewers. I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I just broke down crying. So when you introduced me earlier, imagine like the person on the other end of that just absolutely shutting down. And that was me.
Oh my
So
goodness.
going forward, I was like, okay, I can either let this define the experience and never do it again because that was the most awful thing ever, or realize that nothing is ever going to be that bad again and really take that and grow from it. The amazing thing about video, and I have a love-hate relationship with it because we are so critical of ourselves. So everybody looks in the mirror and is like, oh, I don't look my best today. Oh, I don't feel comfortable. Oh my God, I said too many times. But the thing that sticks through is when I have the conversations with other people, they really click with it. And it's usually when people are researching which real estate agents they want to work with in this area, the feedback that they give is they watched the video content, they saw the personality, they saw the way that I speak, they saw the things that I explain, and really clicked with that. So I think for anybody else who is looking to do video, one, it will never be as bad as crying on live stream in front of 1,000 people. And two, just you have to force yourself to do it because that's how you're going to show up. Now, I said I had a love-hate relationship with video, and that hate side, aside from criticism, is how short lifespan is of social media videos. So when we put something up, the chances are within a day or two, it is no longer relevant in people's news feeds. It's not going to show up as often unless you're creating really highly viral content, which personally I'm not. I'm more focused on that engagement and more focused on that consideration stage rather than the discovery stage with my video content. And it is short-lived. So you can't do it once and expect it to be successful. You really have to stick with it in order to see results from it.
Well, I'm so surprised to hear that story because you've clearly come such a far way. I mean, you're so incredibly comfortable, not just in this conversation, but in these videos that I've come across in doing research for this pod. You do an excellent job communicating. I think, you've outlined so many things very well when it comes to the marketing strategy and the consumer journey and everything along those lines. But what I'd love to kind of wrap this with is just a really great takeaway for the listener, for the audience who's thinking, okay, this is great. I understand the different pieces of the journey, but what does that mean? Like when it comes to my actual content calendar, how consistent should I be putting things out? What should be the mix of content? Can I have stuff about my listings? Should it be more focusing on market trends? Like what's your kind of overall advice, keeping in mind, like you said earlier, that, everyone's kind of got their own audience as well, and it'll be slightly different for each person. But do you just kind of have some overall words of advice for the audience?
So, and this might be long-winded, but it really comes down to building and understanding what your own brand represents, and then sitting down with that and saying, everything that I do has to point in this direction. And that makes filling in the gaps of content a lot easier. So in terms of how often somebody should post, in terms of how often they should be reaching out to their database, in terms of how often they should pick up the phone and make cold calls, it really depends on what those goals are and how you're using the tools to help you achieve the goals. So the goal is never like, I want 1,000 Facebook followers. The goal is, I want to use this content to make people feel comfortable with me. And that makes it easier to say, what 10 questions do I get on a regular basis? Or what are the most common conversations that I'm having with the people that I want to work with on a regular basis? And just using that to fill in that content calendar. For my personal business, I try to be active on social media as much as possible, but like everybody else, you get busy and it kind of goes to the wind. So just what is helpful there is choosing one thing and sticking with it. So for example, I've stuck with doing a weekly market recap on what's happened at the end of every week. And that is something I have to do. Whether or not I post anything else on social media that week, my clients expect that. As far as reaching out, I know that there's a lot of the major coaches and like those companies that promote their systems. They're like, you have to touch your clients 36 times. And that's all nice and wonderful for people who are super organized, but the majority of us are not. And it's all comes down to knowing your business and knowing your audience and what they expect and what they need in order to stay connected with you. A lot of that comes from thinking things through and really sitting down and evaluating the business that you've done. And if you're brand new to the business that you want to do, not selling sunset style, but more what people do you enjoy having conversations with. What questions would those people have? And AI is amazing for helping get that ball rolling because you can use it to have those conversations and develop that strategy.
So you mentioned one way that you're using AI there, but I'm curious if we can just jump a little further into that. How have you been using some of these artificial intelligence tools?
So I am a huge nerd. I love, I spend my free time coding AI right now. And that is my current brain project, is how to develop. I have an idea for a tool that would be really useful to me and I haven't found it anywhere else. So I'm trying to create it. But using ones that are already available, we use it the same way that everybody else does: listing descriptions, social media content, creating a brand voice, and having something that can consistently spit out content that is on par with what I would normally put out as an individual. It emulates me so well, it's scary. And then there's the data analysts side where it is connected to our website traffic. It's connected to the insights in social media to be able to dictate what content is performing best, when things are performing best, how the retargeting strategies that we're using are effective, and watching the consumer interact with social media content, move over to the website, what properties are they looking at, how have they responded to my emails. And it takes all of this data that I would normally spend hours staring at and sifting through and trying to pull one nugget. And I can say, hey, give me 10 things to focus on this week. And then I knock 2 of those things out based on the amazing volume of data that we have through all of these digital delivery means.
Hillary, this has been such a great conversation. So many really, really smart ideas that you've shared. Since this is Power Moves YLN Edition, we like to end every episode by asking, what is your power move in real estate?
Being organized. As much as I'm not, I fall short on the organization like everybody else, but it's really the sitting down and creating a plan that has allowed me to be successful.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Hillary, for joining me on this episode of Power Moves YLN Edition.
Thank you so much for having me, Wade.